Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists, for a leap forward in medicine.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community.
This ecosystem that is being set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network, and it all revolves around you.
Welcome to the Functional Forum. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hello everyone, welcome to the show and welcome to the Functional Forum and welcome to 2024. We are really excited to kick off right now the year of unity. And throughout the year, we're going to be talking about the theme of unity and how unity can affect healthcare. It's going to be really powerful. A special welcome to all of the meetup groups, communities around the country, now all around the world. For those eagle-eyed of you, you'll see new groups in Canada. Welcome. The London group is up and running. I am currently recording this video from South Africa, and I'm seeing the potential of groups to, re-rise all across all the continents as the year of unity moves forward and the need for the kind of work that we're doing becomes more and more clear and more obvious, and doctors are coming together to learn about functional medicine, to learn about health creation, and to build community. And in that spirit, I wanted to share a little bit about the East Tennessee Health Forum. So the reason why tonight is not live and why you can't ask questions is because as this is going out, January 8th, 2024, I'm actually going to be in East Tennessee, in Johnson City, Tennessee, for the first ever session of the East Tennessee Health Forum. This is the brainchild of Dr. Michael Mabry, and if you've been listening to our podcast religiously, you know that he is a doctor practicing functional medicine inside a fully capitated large group health system, where he is doing functional medicine and functional medicine group visits, and starting the process of showcasing that functional medicine is a great fit for value-based care and value-based insurance contracts. And that is a theme that we're going to look at a lot in the next, I guess not in the next year. We're going to be talking a lot about unity, but really in the next decade. This session that we're going to be recording with Dr. Mabry, with Dr. Hanaway, and over 50 guests that are assembled in Johnson City, Tennessee, is to showcase really the difference between the first 10 years of the Functional Forum, which, if I took a step back, was broadly helping doctors actually getting into practice functional medicine. I believe that the next 10 years is really going to be about scaling functional medicine throughout healthcare. And I think that value-based payments is going to be a big part of that. Capitation is going to be a big part of that. And that's why next month, February 2024, which is our 10-year anniversary episode, is going to be from the East Tennessee Health Forum. And I can't wait for that event. And that is even happening tonight, January 8th, 2024. So watch out for that in February. It's our 10-year anniversary episode. Thank you to everyone who's been watching over the last 10 years. It's been such a joy. All right, so let's talk about unity, and let's talk about how we can bring unity into medicine. What do we learn in 2023? Well, one of the things that we learned is that if you want the answer to any question, you can just put it into ChatGPT and they'll tell you the exact answer. And so that's what I did. I said, how can we bring more unity consciousness into medicine? Just to see what the almighty ChatGPT would think. And bear in mind, ChatGPT is trained on like all the content on the internet. You can see now there's lawsuits because it's been trained on the New York Times. So, there's a fairly broad or very broad, data set that it's been trained on. What did it come up with? What are the 10 things that it said could help bring unity consciousness into medicine? And what you're going to see is this is a very familiar list. So first, holistic care models, implementing holistic healthcare models that address physical, mental, emotional, and social aspects of health, treating patients as integrated beings rather than isolated symptoms. That is functional medicine. That is everything that we've been doing here. We've covered integrated medicine, functional medicine. That is what that is. It is a holistic care model. So we're on the right foot already, because this is what we've been doing already for 10 years here at the Functional Forum. Second, interdisciplinary collaboration. Part of the reason why we went for functional medicine as opposed to the integrative medicine forum is because we believe that there needs to be a common language amongst practitioners, and ultimately encouraging collaboration amongst healthcare professionals of different disciplines provide comprehensive care that considers various perspectives and expertise. And just to give one example of something that we've been super hot on is the use of health coaches, right? Because without behavior change, functional medicine is not really that useful. And so, this is the exact example of interdisciplinary collaboration. 3, patient-centered care, shifting towards patient-centered care that values the individual's unique needs, preferences, and values, fostering a more empathetic and collaborative relationship between healthcare providers and patients. Absolutely. Like, this is, again, something that we've been on for more than 10 years here. And one of the interesting things is the third leg of the stool of evidence-based medicine is patient preferences. And it's really critical that we understand that, because people respond better to things, the therapies that they believe in and they like. And that's a critical part of evidence-based medicine. 4, preventive and lifestyle medicine, right? The foundation of functional medicine is lifestyle medicine. One of the reasons why we're doing this experiment in Johnson City, Tennessee, around calling it the health forum as opposed to the functional forum, is because we want to be more inclusive of preventive medicine practitioners, lifestyle medicine practitioners, and we want to bring all those people to the table. So it's a bit of a test to see whether that's possible, but ChatGPT likes it, emphasizing preventive care and lifestyle interventions, recognizing that well-being is not solely dependent on medical treatment, but also on factors like diet, exercise, and stress management. It's the foundation of functional medicine. Cultural competence, promoting cultural competence and among healthcare professionals to understand and respect diverse beliefs and practices, acknowledging the influence of cultural factors on health. Mission critical. We haven't spent that long on that, so maybe that's something that we will spend more time on this year. Community engagement. The whole thing has been about community engagement. It started as a meetup group, a community in New York, involving communities in healthcare discussions, interventions, and education, recognizing the role of social determinants of health and community support in overall well-being. I've just had a crash course on this as part of a community palliative and hospice care effort for my father in South Africa. So I understand super critically, more than everything else, that you can do all the awesome functional medicine stuff, but if the social determinants of health are not in place, you're barking up the wrong tree, and we have to get really good at that. Mind-body approaches, integrating mind-body approaches such as mindfulness and meditation into healthcare practices to address mental and emotional aspects of health alongside physical conditions. ChatGPT says it must be true. And obviously, mind-body approaches have been critical to everything we've done, and the mental emotional is right in the middle of the functional medicine operating system. Technology integration, that's what we did, and that's what we've done for 10 years. We've introduced you to technologies that we know can make a difference in building effective practices, leveraging technology for integrated healthcare solutions such as electronic health records that facilitate communication and coordination amongst different healthcare providers. Absolutely. Education and training, incorporating unity consciousness principles into healthcare education and training programs, fostering a mindset that values collaboration and interconnectedness. Absolutely. That's the whole point of these community meetups, is to facilitate education in collaboration. And then 10, environmental considerations, recognizing the impact of environmental factors on health and promoting sustainable practices that contribute to both individual and planetary well-being. Absolutely. We have to take an environmental site, go back to people like Jamie Harvey that we had on the Functional Forum years ago. We talked about, planetary well-being is critical. So it's really exciting to see that even if you put something into ChatGPT, today, you get these kind of answers, right? And you get these kind of answers coming forward. And so, I would say in a weird way, I would say that the Functional Forum has always been about unity. It's not in a weird way. It's absolutely critical. It was part of exactly what Gabe and I were interested in doing when we started this 10 years ago. We wanted to bring unity to practitioners, initially in New York, who didn't know each other, but were practicing the same. And we thought that would be something that was valuable. And it turns out that it was really valuable, and that lots of people around the country and around the world needed this kind of energy to be able to bring this together. So really excited to kick off our year of unity with an understanding of that. And now I'm very excited for an interview that I'm going to get to do, or I got to do actually back in December. So, Dr. Andrew Weil has meant a lot to a lot of people in this community. He's been a mentor to a lot of doctors. He's been a consciousness shifter for many doctors. He's been involved, obviously, as a key leader in integrative medicine, but even going back to the 60s, he was a key innovator in psychedelic medicine that we actually talked about on this interview. So I'm really excited to welcome him for the very first time. It took me 10 years to get Dr. Andrew Weil on the Functional Forum, and I hope you enjoy it. So a warm welcome to the Evolution of Medicine platform for the first time, Dr. Andrew Weil. Welcome, Doctor. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So the theme for this year is unity, and maybe a good place for us to start is, you've been a leader in the field of integrative medicine and pushing that idea forward, which is really taking the best of conventional medicine and complementary medicine, alternative medicine, and fusing it together for the betterment of the patient. And it seems like a good way to kick off our year of unity. So, you want to give us your thoughts on the state of play of integrative medicine today?
I think in the U.S., integrative medicine is rapidly becoming mainstream. That the majority of U.S. medical schools have joined the Academic Consortium for Integrative Medicine. There are many textbooks published of integrative medicine. I think most medical schools are teaching some form of it. I think there's still a long way to go. The term integrative medicine has become mainstream. It's widely used in academic discourse. I think a lot of people still don't know what it means, and people still confuse it with alternative medicine, which it isn't. And I think our goal is much, much larger than simply bringing alternative practices into the mainstream. My goal has always been to try to change the paradigm from which conventional medicine operates, and that touches on some of the things that you're very interested in. So our center at the University of Arizona, our main educational offering is a 2-year intensive fellowship. We've graduated almost 3,000 physicians from that now. And the main purpose of that is to remedy the deficiencies in conventional training of physicians, starting with whole fields like nutrition, which are just left out.
Yeah, do you think, I've had the pleasure of meeting a number of your graduates over the years, popping up in very interesting situations, either in private practice or in businesses, or actually in larger, health systems now, popping up, and they're doing great work and getting the word out. How much of a barrier do you think it is that this has to be like postgraduate education as opposed to just part of the education that doctors go through?
Well, I think in some ways it's not worth trying to get it into undergraduate medical education, because that curriculum is just so top heavy. It's very hard to get anything else into it. And we've tended to focus on residency training, because I think that's where a lot of attitudes and practice habits are formed. We have a condensed curriculum that's a required accredited part of residency training. It's been adopted by over 100 residencies now, and in various fields. And the goal is eventually that, all residencies will include education in this area. So whether you go to a gastroenterologist or a psychiatrist or a dermatologist, that person will have learned the basics of nutrition, mind-body interactions, the strengths and weaknesses of other systems of medicine, information about botanicals and dietary supplements and so forth.
It's interesting that in this time where integrative medicine has started its journey into the mainstream, the need for this unity seems to only get bigger. Obviously we have for the first time now, a decrease in life expectancy, which is unprecedented in human history. How do you think about that?
Well, I think, that one reason that integrative medicine has made such advances in the U.S. is that our healthcare system is more in shambles than anywhere else in the world. And looking back on my own career, I've been writing and saying the same things about medicine and medical education for almost 50 years. And it's only relatively recently that I've been paid attention to by my colleagues. And I trace that to the time when the economics of healthcare here really began to go south. And as long as it was business as usual, it was very easy for doctors to ignore what patients were asking for. And so I see a definite correlation with economics, and as the healthcare system deteriorates, more and more institutions are opening up to integrative medicine and the kinds of training that we've been doing.
It's interesting. I've been in a few conversations this year where I've heard people say things that I've never heard before, where they would say, hey, leaders of health systems say, hey, we're losing too many patients to integrative and functional medicine doctors. It's registering at a new level when it makes an economic impact, I think, right?
Yes. Also, there is, as you know, growing unhappiness of not only patients but physicians with the nature of healthcare and medicine. When I went to medical school long ago, medicine looked like a very attractive profession. And now I have heard so many doctors say they wish they'd gone into another field, or they wouldn't let a son or daughter of theirs go into medicine today. I think the unhappiness of practitioners, along with the unhappiness of patients and the impossible economics of healthcare, are really driving this movement.
Absolutely. One other area of unity, I know that a central tenet of integrative medicine is sort of this unity between, mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
And obviously we have a mental health crisis. You might say we have a spiritual health crisis as well. So what need for integrative medicine, and how do you think we're doing in those areas?
Well, I have a lot to say about that. One of the major philosophical planks of integrative medicine is whole person medicine, that human beings are more than physical bodies. We're also mental, emotional beings and spiritual entities and community members. And medicine has to pay attention to those other dimensions of human life in order to be effective. I think the inability of conventional medicine to pay attention to the mental, spiritual components of people and their relevance in health and illness, it's something that arises out of the materialistic paradigm that now dominates Western science and medicine. And that is a very tough nut to crack, that conventional science does not believe in the reality of anything that's not physical. And that's, and also the materialistic paradigm does not allow for non-physical causation of physical events. If you see a change in a physical system, the cause has to be physical. And that's why we've never been able to really make sense of placebo responses and see the reality of the usefulness of hypnotic suggestion, for example. There are so many mind-body therapies that are cost-effective, time-effective, even fun for both practitioner and patient, and that they're very underutilized in medicine. And I just give you one glaring example. The opioid crisis has now forced people to realize that opioids are simply not appropriate standalone treatments for chronic pain. And a lot of entities, one is the state of Oregon, the Veterans Administration, have mandated integrative treatment for chronic pain syndrome. But when you look at how they define integrative treatment, they list modalities like yoga, nutrition, acupuncture, massage, never mention mind-body interventions. It's just a blind spot. And I don't know that we've made great strides there. I think that's going to take some time and constant rethinking.
Yeah, one of the things that had quite a strong influence on me was the film Escape Fire, of which
you
were in talent, and that was looking at particularly opiates, particularly in the VA. It seems like the VA is an area where there has been progress, and I guess one of the things that I've thought is that perhaps group delivery of care by its very nature stimulates a sort of area of mind-body medicine by itself. Obviously, Jim Gordon's been on the front lines of working out those kind of groups. What are your thoughts on that?
I think in practice, that's a very useful strategy. One of the problems we have is that we train people so well, and then we graduate them into a world where everything's stacked against them. And one of the things mainly stacked against them is priorities of reimbursement. and they have to really figure out how can they be paid fairly for what they do. We happily pay for interventions for drugs. We don't pay for a doctor to teach a patient a breathing technique or advise about how to eat. But one strategy that has worked is group visits, especially in areas like around nutrition, diabetes control, hypertension control, and that allows for a kind of billing that provides fair reimbursement.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure. I do think the billing piece of it is interesting, but also, being in community with other people, whether
Definitely.
that's a short period or whether that's living in community, sort of pushes buttons for you that don't get pushed.
Yes.
When you're in relationship with a private physician that no one else talks about. And I think some of that is where the healing occurs as well, because you're sort of forced to confront some things in a healthy, supportive way.
Yep, I agree with that, definitely.
That's really interesting. Yeah, well, I think definitely the mind body piece is huge. When you go into these conventional medicine areas, is there one part of integrative medicine that you think is sort of like the easiest place for doctors to get their head around integrating some of what comes into integrative medicine?
I think what we really need is we need outcomes and effectiveness studies to compare conventional medicine with integrative medicine in common conditions that now absorb most of our healthcare dollars. So what I'd like to see is, make a list of, say, the 12 conditions that fit that, things like, chronic pain, back pain, GERD, allergies. There's a whole list we could come up with where I think integrative medicine really shines. And then I'd like to see matched patients, and they're matched for age, gender, diagnosis. One goes to conventional medicine, one goes to integrative medicine. And then we track outcomes, medical outcomes, cost outcomes, patient satisfaction. That's the kind of data that we need. We don't need more randomized controlled trials to see whether St. John's wort works, better than a placebo. We need this kind of outcomes and effectiveness data that we can take to the people who pay for healthcare and show them that it's in their interest to pay for integrative treatment that's going to save them money. And I'm quite sure that we can get that data, but the problem is, who's going to do those studies? They're expensive to do. They require large populations. NIH doesn't do them. Who's going to pay for them? So that's a real challenge now to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. This year into 2023, we had content around sort of the shift in payment modalities towards value-based payment. I think we all can see that integrative care is more valuable than conventional care. It just hasn't been paid for like that. And I think, potentially there's a unity or convergence of those two things there, where at the same time, healthcare moves towards essentially, you doing better when you keep people healthy for the minimum possible cost. Then in arrives the medicine that is designed for that.
Right. So one of my thoughts is if we could engage the private sector in some of this, because corporations are hobbled by healthcare costs and they're not constrained by ideology. They just want to know what works. So if we could get them to fund at least some of the pilot studies, that we could then go to larger studies that will produce that kind of data.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's valuable. I really want to go back to the thing you said about materialism, because on the last functional forum, we were covering a conference on mitochondria. There was an education piece there where it was sort of saying like that the doctor was saying, look, here's all the history of vitalism, right? Almost like history of vitalism, 1850 to today.
Yeah.
And then on this other side, he's now using like meta-transcriptomics to, in some cases, like measure the energy that is coming from mitochondrial genes. And the supposition was that potentially, what they're seeing is that the way that mitochondria communicate, not just within the cell, but between the cells, that energetic spectrum is measurable. And in people with severe chronic illness, SIRS and those kind of illnesses, you could see how low it is. And the idea was, is this the vital force? Like, is this vitalism happening? And I just thought, because if it is, I mean, I don't know if it is, but if it is, you could see that scientific materialism and vitalism could unify, and I think that would be healthy.
That would be terrific. That's new to me. I'll have to look up that research on mitochondria. But one of the challenges with talking to conventional doctors about traditional Chinese medicine, for example, is that it all is about circulation of subtle energy, of qi. Well, if you don't believe in subtle energy, you're not going to get anywhere with that, and that's very difficult to talk with scientific materialists about. So to be able to document that there are these kinds of energies, biofields, biophotons, all of that, I think that's a frontier that's, I hope, we're approaching fairly rapidly.
I listened to this thing recently on the interstitium, and talking about how the interstitium was missed by conventional medicine is 25%, that extracellular matrix. And in the podcast, they made note of the fact that the interstitium was understood by Chinese medicine by 4,000 years,
Right.
4,000 years. And it was kind of like the first moment that I'd heard on mainstream education saying, hang on a minute, we've got this completely wrong. These guys somehow knew about it. What else do they know? And it was really a nice moment for the listener, because you don't often get that message through the corporate media.
Right. Well, that reminds me, one thing that I've written about and often like to talk to audiences about is that in traditional Chinese medicine, knew nothing about the immune system as we understand it. They didn't know anything about what those organs did, but they had an awareness that the body had a defensive function, and they searched the world to find things, mostly natural substances, that could enhance the defensive function of the body. And they came up with various mushrooms and ginseng and so forth. In the West, we're looking at the anatomy of the body, which the Chinese didn't, and we saw these organs but didn't understand what they did, so we said they were functionless organs. When I was in medical school, the adenoids and tonsils were considered functionless, vestigial, and that gave doctors license to take them out. When I was growing up, you couldn't get to adolescence with your tonsils and adenoids. They were considered useless. Yeah. Appendix was considered a useless organ, and often taken out without people's consent when they had any kind of abdominal surgery. I mean, the worst offense is the thymus gland. When I was in medical school, I was taught that had no function, that it got large in adolescence and then shrank, and this was considered proof that it was somehow functionless. I don't follow that logic, but there was it's in the 1950s, American doctors invented a disease that every child had called thymic hypertrophy that was treatable by bombarding the thymus with x-rays. And that caused the thymus to shrink immediately. So unbelievable that we were destroying the thymus, not understanding its function, at a time when Chinese medicine, I've just lost you on.
I'm here.
You're here. Let me see if I can get you back to my. Just a second.
I'm hearing everything on my end in case.
Okay, I'm trying to get. Here we are. For some reason, I am not. I can't see you anymore, so.
I can see you. If you're okay with me not seeing me.
Yeah, that's all right. So what I was saying is, at a time when Chinese medicine, which was really a system of function rather than a form, understood that the body had a defensive function, even though they didn't understand the individual organs. And in the West, we labeled these organs as useless and actually removed them or damaged them. So I think that's, illustrates the advantages of thinking in a functional way.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Actually, as you say, functional way, it brings up a question. Something that came up for us last year was, what is it about the language of what we do that is there something in the language that is holding back? So, integrative medicine has taken some incredible strides, the academic consortium, some of the things you mentioned there. Functional medicine has made some incredible strides, the Cleveland Clinic stuff. I mean, the number of doctors that are doing that every day. And then you look at something like lifestyle medicine that, has really taken off in the last year, in other ways too. And I guess I would just love to get your thoughts on, we've had some conversations of, would would a unifying nomenclature help to move this thing forward, or like this standard of care forward that was a vital focus, lifestyle first, root cause approach, which I think all of them are interested in. I'm not sure what your thoughts on that are.
So I've always said that one day we'll be able to drop the word integrative, and this will just be good medicine. It's what medicine should be. It's what medicine can be in the future. So I feel quite confident about that.
And how close are we to that, do you think?
I think time is on our side, and it's going to be economic necessity that drives this forward. In the past, this has been a consumer-driven movement, but now I think it's really, hard economic considerations that are driving this, because the current healthcare system is simply economically unsustainable.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I foresaw that actually 18 years ago, and why I got into the industry, because I was a health economist, and I saw like the exponential cost curve can only go so far before it causes other problems in society. And I think you're absolutely right. That will be the next economic imperative. I guess, just more broadly speaking, what are your like hopes and dreams, and also concerns about the future of integrated medicine?
Well, I could see allopathic medicine becoming a subspecialty that will be for the management of critical illness, trauma, terminal care. I think it may be that a lot of smaller and community hospitals aren't going to be there anymore, and that large urban centers will have one academic hospital that's the only one that can afford the hardware that will deal with that kind of critical illness. And there may be new kinds of healthcare institutions that will spring up to take the place of the ones that don't survive. I've always wanted to see healing centers come into existence, which I would think would be managed or directed by integratively trained physicians, but would have teams of practitioners, of all different kinds of training working under the same roof. And these institutions would not be for critical care, terminal care. People could go there if they were well, who wanted adjustment of lifestyle. You could go there for the management of all the routine kind of complaints and lifestyle related diseases that conventional medicine doesn't manage well. And that when you came out of these places, whether you went for a weekend or a week, you'd know more than when you went in about how to eat, how to maybe cook, how to grow some of your own food, how to use natural remedies, how to take advantage of different kinds of health practices. And I would see stays in these institutions being paid for in whole or in part by insurance. So that's one of my fantasies. I'd love to see that come about.
What about on the other side of the coin? I mean, obviously we've just been through the pandemic. You could argue that like our medicine perfectly lined up, right, for preventing, reducing the effect of, and dealing with that. It did seem like during the pandemic there were some somewhat existential threats to integrated medicine, in just the way that the government chose to, deal with people speaking about it or otherwise. What are your thoughts now post-pandemic on what we learned from that, and anything that you learned particularly on the state of the game?
Well, first of all, there's still a lot of COVID around. In fact, at the moment, I know more people that have it than had it like some months ago. So it's still with us. Secondly, I think it showed us how unprepared we were for dealing with something like that. And this was not a terrible disease as pandemics go. We I think are still quite vulnerable, and something else could come around that had a much higher mortality rate. And I hope that in the future we'll be much better prepared to deal with that. And I think integrative medicine was able to make some great contributions to prevention, to adjunctive treatments, and so forth. And I think we will continue to look for that. But I think, it made me realize how vulnerable we are, that this is, given the factors that drove this one, we mix populations up very effectively today, much more so than we did in the past. Much more international travel. There's much more mixing of people. And I just think we're quite vulnerable to infectious disease.
if you started the pandemic with the knowledge that you have now about what it was, the age gradient, how it affected people, so forth, do you see any like different plan this time, the second time around?
Well, in the U.S., I think we really blew it at the beginning. I think we could have stopped or greatly reduced this if right at the beginning we'd seen what it was and didn't deny that something like this was happening and took steps to reduce the entry of that into our population. But we had a person in the White House who was absolutely not the right person to be managing this, and really denied what was happening for some time. But I think if we'd taken steps to isolate and quarantine early on, we would not have had it to the extent that we have.
Do you really think that's I mean, I see like New Zealand and whatever. I mean, New Zealand has
Right.
like 3 parts of entry from 3 places in the world.
Yeah.
It's really shut down. I mean, there's enough. I don't see how America could have ever done that. I mean, I live near San Francisco. We were in
Right.
I don't know, Chinatown in January 2020. There's 15 direct flights from Wuhan every day. I don't know
Yeah.
how we've done that, but I hear you. Let me ask you this. So, another big area that you've obviously been at the forefront of is emerging into healthcare right now, and I guess I'd love to get your thoughts as to whether you think it's a part of integrative medicine, is psychedelic medicine. Lots of interest. I don't know if there's a profitable psychedelic clinic in the country yet, but certainly there's a lot of interest because of the incredible outcomes, through that in some of these early MAPS trials. What are your thoughts about the place of psychedelic medicine in integrative medicine and generally in medicine?
Well, I think that's where it belongs. I think it is ultimate integrative treatment. The demand for training in this area has been overwhelming at our center, in the general population. So it clearly is coming. And I think the potential for therapeutic use of psychedelics is vast, not just in psychiatric medicine, but in physical medicine as well. And, I wish there was more attention paid to that. It is not just about drug-resistant depression and PTSD and OCD. I've seen amazing results of psychedelics in autoimmune disease, in chronic pain, and a whole variety of illnesses. And I think the safety profile of them is very great. I think there's a great need for people who are well trained in their use. I don't know how all this is going to play out with all the commercial interest in it and, this concern and that concern, but clearly they're here to stay. And I would love to see psychedelic therapy embraced by integrative medicine. I think it will be.
Yeah, it's interesting because in other countries, I've been in Mexico and met with some of those doctors, like
Yep.
they don't really see a gap between them. But I think, the lifestyle medicine and MAPS couldn't be more separate, if
Right.
they tried in a certain way. And one of the things that we saw, like we've done some pilots in groups in treatment-resistant depression in Utah with ketamine therapy. One of the things that I recognize is that it actually stimulates the one thing it generally does is stimulate people to want to take better care of themselves post experience. And I think, given what a challenge that is to us as a population in general, there's value there, even on top of the value of the treatment itself. Is that something you've
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes at a central problem we have with health in this country is that most of the diseases that conventional medicine is trying to manage and is managing very poorly are lifestyle related diseases. And if people early enough in life made better choices about eating, exercise, handling stress, and so forth, we would not be faced with this problem. So I think that's a big challenge, is how can we do a better job at health promotion and disease prevention? And I think that comes down to the fact that they don't pay. We unless we can figure out how to make health promotion and disease prevention pay, we're not going to get anywhere. And the vested interests that now control things and are making vast amounts of money from the healthcare system don't want anything to change.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd love to just, I guess end on the legacy, that you have. Obviously, your work has meant a lot to a lot of people, and obviously the more directly you've been involved with them, let's say your fellowship, it's significant, it's life-changing, it probably changes the course of almost everyone's career who goes through that process. obviously there's books and other things that, you implement through people. There's restaurants and all those different things that you've been involved with. I guess part of the thing that I've been reflecting on is like, hey, I've been trying to do the best I can for 18 years, but it's not getting better yet. Like that impact has still not reached enough people to actually, turn the corner. And I guess I'd love to just get your thoughts on what it means to have a legacy in healthcare, where and what kind of effort for what kind of sustained period of time do you think it's going to take for us to, I hate to use the word win, but like for like health to spring eternal?
Well, I am optimistic. I think that, as I tell all of our graduating classes, time is on our side. That the deterioration of the healthcare system is only going to accelerate. The costs of conventional medicine are only going to increase. We have an aging population, and the older people are, the more they become drains on our healthcare resources. We have an epidemic of fat kids who are getting hypertension and diabetes at early ages, was something we never had to deal with before. We are much too reliant on expensive technology, and we do a very poor job at managing most of the epidemic diseases that are out there now. So all that's going to get worse. And as it gets worse, the wisdom of what we are doing becomes more and more apparent. So it's just very clear to me that this is the future, has to be the future. And as I said, one day we'll be able to drop the word integrative. I'm not going to give a timeline on when that will be, but I think it'll be, I think in the next 10 years, we'll see very significant change.
Beautiful. Well, this has been great on the theme of unity. Actually, because this is the first time that you've been on the show, and I typically, at the very beginning, 10 years ago, I would ask this question of people when they came on for the first time. When I say the words, the evolution of medicine, what does that bring up for you?
Well, I think we are evolving out of an era of extreme dependence on technological solutions for all health problems, and maybe getting back to some of our roots. I'm amazed at the wisdom of Hippocrates in the 5th century BC, who really was the father of lifestyle medicine and gave very specific advice about ways of eating and being physically active in accordance with the seasons and so forth, and who urged us to revere the healing power of nature and first do no harm. And those principles, I think, have really been lost in this era of fascination with technology.
Absolutely. Well, Doc, I just want to share my appreciation here. This has been an incredible way to kick off our year of unity. My hope through this year is that we're able to share clinical insight that can bring unity amongst the different clinical paradigms, drive interest in nomenclature that, drives unity. And I'm also hoping for, political and economic unity actually around this to become the standard of care. And I just want to share my appreciation for all the work that you've done, all the people you've inspired. And it's now really exciting to see those people stepping into themselves and going out and making change. And I think, you've started something that is an unstoppable force, and it's just a question of when it will land across the country and across the world. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
All right. This has been the evolution of medicine. This has been the Functional Forum, beginning of the year of unity with Dr. Andrew Weil. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dr. Andrew Weil. As you see, we don't agree about everything, but ultimately, that is going to be part of the journey for this year and for all of us as humanity to work out how to engage and participate and be with people who we don't agree with. And again, part of why we chose to build the Functional Forum as a community was so that you could bump up into ideas, other ideas that were interesting and new and novel, and have an opportunity, a forum for communication and connection. All right, so we couldn't really talk anymore about the Year of Unity without addressing the elephant in the room for 2024. Now, if you are eagle-eyed and you've watched the Functional Forum for a long time, you know that in the initial opening credits of the Functional Forum, we have, some of the speakers that have graced us with their presence over the years. And back in 2016, we actually hosted Robert Kennedy Jr. to be a speaker on the Functional Forum. And it was actually it ended up being the launch of the Children's Health Defense. It was then called the World Mercury Project. And it was in New York, and we had like 300 people there, and it was awesome. That video has been taken off our YouTube channel. I still have it, and I might put it back up. But unless you haven't been paying full attention, Bobby Kennedy is running for president and is really doing very well. And so as a starting point, like over the years, we've dibbled and dabbled into politics on this show. And we've had, Democrats, we've had Republicans on the show. We did an episode on politics where we had, one Democrat and one Republican. But uniquely, Bobby Kennedy is running on an independent ticket, which is really interesting because ultimately I'm an independent. I grew up in England. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. The only people that we've had on the show who are political in nature are people that believe that functional medicine should be the standard of care, right? If you go back to the episode we did in Idaho, where we had the lady who was running for Senate there, come in and tour functional medicine Idaho and see what it was all about. And it was her, First Nations history that told her some of the ideas of unity consciousness that we spoke about earlier. And not only is someone who's been on the Functional Forum running for president, but that person is running on a platform of bringing people together in unity. And so what I wanted to do is to showcase why I think this is mission critical. And this is a clip on from the other day from an interview that I was watching with Bobby Kennedy that I hope underlines to everyone, this is not a side issue. Like, this is a critical issue. And you'll see, like, this is not a man who is an influencer, talking about the things in public that we're glad that he's talking about. This is a guy who has litigated glyphosate. Glyphosate is talked about in functional medicine, environmental medicine conferences as a key driver of a lot of chronic illness. So this is a man in the arena. This is a man who cares about environmental medicine. This is a man who, is on our team. And I'm super excited to share this clip just so you can get a context for, what can happen this year. Enjoy.
Kind of the broader point that I was making about the decline of the middle class, we spend 1.3 trillion on the military every year, and that is just bankrupting us. But we spend 4.3 trillion on healthcare, and 93% of Medicare costs go to chronic disease. So it is bankrupting our country. Yeah. And what I'm going to do when I get in office is to end the chronic disease epidemic. I'm going to identify the exposures, the things that are making us sick, and then I'm going to end them. And you can do that. You can say, well, what if you find out that high fructose corn syrup is responsible for the obesity epidemic? That's a huge industry. You can't just tell them to stop producing. But that's what they said about glyphosate in Roundup. They said it's too big. 85% of farmers are using it, and almost 100% of farmers are using it, and most home gardeners, and it's in all of our food. We sued them, and we won. The first three suits, 287 million for the first suit. Representing a home gardener who had been using glyphosate, using Roundup, and got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. 89 million for the second case, and then the jury we asked for $1 billion on the third case, which was a couple that had been with a dog. A Labrador Retriever had been just home gardening, and they avoided all of the chemicals. They were very, very, scared of chemicals. Mm-hmm. But Roundup said on it, it's safer than aspirin. It's safe. It had a picture on the label of a guy spraying in a bare-chested, no shirt and no shoes, and this is what they're telling the public. They knew that was a lie. They knew it was going to give you cancer. And we showed that to the jury in the last one. Both of the members, the husband and wife and the dog, all got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the same time, and the dog died. The husband and wife were dying, and we asked the jury for $1 billion, and they gave us $2.2 billion. And then Monsanto came to the table, settled all 40,000 cases of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, all home gardeners, and they agreed to take glyphosate out of Roundup for home gardening. They haven't done it yet, but they've agreed to do it. So you can be the way that you can change policy is by making the science clear enough that the bar, the lawyers, are then going to have enough evidence, enough science that they can go over what is called the Daubert threshold. You can't sue about a product unless there's a certain threshold of peer-reviewed science out there. It's a very high threshold. But NIH should be doing that science, and it won't do it. And once you do it, even if you can't change the policy because you're dealing with these big agricultural interests that own Congress, there's still another way to change policy, which is to create enough truth, enough science out there that the lawyers can go after the people who are making America sick.
So the reason why I shared this clip particularly is because this is the reason why I'm here. So for those of you who don't know the story, like I was trained as a health economist, and in my training in 2003, I saw that there was an exponential increase in healthcare costs that was already happening and was going to continue to happen, and it was being driven by chronic illness. And in 2005, I moved to America to try and work out where chronic illness was coming from, what was causing it, and to see if it was reversible. And the journey that I've been on first was to work in a clinic with a naturopathic doctor where I saw that it was reversible, and I saw it reversed. Then I took a job selling to practitioners to try and see, okay, who is doing this and what are they doing and what are the different modalities and what are the different business models and how does it work? And that was a deep, broad education. And as I followed that path, it became pretty clear that, that toxicity, environmental issues, environmental toxicants, the food environment, the air environment, the water environment, this was playing a critical role in driving chronic illness, driving this exponential increase. And, ultimately, for us to unwind this, first of all, we have to acknowledge that this is happening. And second of all, we have to build a structure to reverse it at the scale that it exists. And a big part of that is functional medicine doctors. And that's why we spent the first 10 years really focused on helping doctors move to functional medicine and get good at reversing chronic illness like that. And a lot of the work that I've been doing for the last few years is really thinking about how can we reverse chronic illness at the scale that it exists. And that's been, some of the efforts that we've gone towards group visits and, doing functional medicine in group models so that we can really, grow and scale. So I'm not going to talk about Bobby Kennedy all year, but certainly we have a presidential candidate who's on the theme of unity, who's bringing people together, who's running as an independent, and who has been on the front lines of advocating for an understanding of the environment as a driver of chronic illness. And I think, it's something that I'm certainly going to be involved over the next year to try the best that I can to, create unity and harmony through the independent movement, and just to see the kind of people that are joining along here. Like if you've been following for years, we've had Charles Eisenstein as a keynote here on the Functional Forum a couple of times. He spoke at a big event that I put on Powder Mountain in 2016 and we had on the show. And I frequently referenced him and his work and his essays because he is, in my estimation, like really bringing the unity consciousness to the world at this moment. And he's a major, he's a major advisor, senior advisor on the Kennedy campaign. So this is unprecedented, right? This has never happened before. We've never had this, even with the people that we've had on the Functional Forum before who were involved in politics. Nothing like this has ever happened. This is mission critical. And so, I would encourage all of us to just take a think about what would actually make the world, our world, the world that we know, the work that we do, what could make that accelerate? How could we really move things forward in the next 4 years? And I think that that's a big part of what can happen this year. So to that end, I'm grateful to be here. This is the beginning of the year of Unity. We're going to be bringing you tons of awesome content over the next year with that theme. We've had some great input already from practitioners and from people all across the world about what Unity means to them and how they see it in medicine. Super grateful for the opportunity to continue doing the Functional Forum. Next month is the 10-year anniversary of the Functional Forum. We'll be at the East Tennessee Health Forum, and expect Dr. Patrick Hanaway, expect Dr. Michael Mabry, and many of the other guests there as we chart the path forward. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next month. Welcome to the Year of Unity. Good night.